1st, and you're listening to the Los Angeles City Council Audits Committee. I am Nuri Martinez, the chair, and I'm joined by Mr. Parks. We can get started. Mr. Clerk, can you read the item into the record, please?
Yes, ma'am. The first item is a verbal report from the City Controller relative to the various functions and operations of the Controller's Office, recent projects undertaken by the new administration, and the proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you. And today we have the pleasure of having our City Controller, Ron Galperin, with us this afternoon. Thank you very much for being here, and I guess I can turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so very much for the opportunity to be here with you. And what I wanted to do is lay out a couple things pursuant to what your requests were. And to begin kind of with a couple of fast facts about the Controller's Office, then to go to about a 15-minute presentation on the control panel, which is our open data site, to talk a little bit about next our audits and initiatives, and then about budget. So I'll begin with the fast facts, and I'm sure you know a lot of these things, but we just wanted to kind of touch base on them and say them for the record as well. We've got about 150-some folks who work in the Controller's Office. I'm actually very proud of the people who work in our office, very much interested in accountability, and they're very detail-oriented people. The job, obviously, of the Controller is to essentially be the chief accountant, but also to be the public's watchdog to ensure efficiency and transparency. And for myself, I am very much focused on how do we achieve the best ROI, the best return on investment in absolutely everything that we do. We are a central support department, and our constituency includes city departments, the council, investors, employees, vendors, the public at large. And our basic operations basically break down as follows. Payroll, and we pay about 45,000 employees, $129 million biweekly. And that is pursuant to about 42 MOUs. And we do so with tremendous accuracy, I'm pleased to say, but we've got a pretty old system. There is the financial management system, and that supports every department. We've got about 1,800 users citywide. About 71,000 documents are processed monthly, and $9 billion in payments were processed during the last 2 years alone. We have a financial reporting section, and that produces a whole series of different reports, everything from the March 1st revenue report, which is based on meetings with economists and forecasters, our preliminary annual financial report. There's also our comprehensive annual financial report, and this year we launched a shorter version of that for the general public, and it's a much more visual one, which is a community financial report, and we have copies of it here, which we'd like to present to you, and it's meant to provide information about the finances of the city for those who are not accountants. We have a State Street report, and we also do the single audit and cost allocation plan for the city to receive about $500 million plus in grants, and then another $19 million in reimbursements. Auditing, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a few moments after this presentation of the control panel, but it should be noted that in the last 5 years the city's budget has grown by about 22%, and at the same time auditing staff has been reduced about 65%, from 52 to 22 authorized positions, and needless to say, not all those authorized positions are even filled. We have a demand audit section, which is responsible for review and approval of more than $5 billion in expenditures. We also oversee 834 open purchasing cards issued to council control departments. Waste, Fraud, and Abuse Unit, and I can talk a little bit about that later. Our Open Data Initiative, and Certification and Fiscal Monitoring Program, which I know you had a couple of questions about, but what we can do is maybe do that after the control panel presentation, if that works for you. So, first of all, we have here Kyle Hall, who's with my office, and let me also introduce some of the other folks who are here. There's Barrett Spear, who is our Chief of Auditing, and we have Todd Bowie, who is our financial reporting wizard, and so much more. And what Kyle is going to be doing is helping us to kind of walk through the control panel. By the way, welcome also to Councilmember Blumenfeld.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
So we are living in an era, and I know that Councilmember Blumenfield has actually seen this because we had the pleasure of doing a presentation together in your district a couple of weeks ago, which was fantastically attended, I have to say, and I'm very happy and welcome the opportunity for any of the other council members, if they'd like us to come and do in their district a presentation for the community. We're ready and set to do that at pretty much any time. We're living clearly in the era of big data. And what we're trying to do is to bring the city into the 21st century on all of this. Big data does not in and of itself mean smart data, as I think we all know, but it's really the beginning of trying to gather the vast amounts of data that we have here in the city and make some good use of it. The mayor has actually been very focused on this. A number of council members have been very focused on this as well, and with good reason. What we sought to do with the control panel was to focus on what is our bailiwick, which is the financial data of the city. So there are two main features of the control panel, which we're going to explore today. There's the data catalog, which enables easy access to all of the raw data. And then there is the Checkbook LA, which is essentially a virtual checkbook that shows payments that are made for goods and services. We also have a lot of information about payroll. And on the right, by the way, you'll see categories and special tools, including for software and app developers, to create new and innovative ways to look at the data. And they've actually been doing that. We've been teaming up with techno geeks all over Los Angeles. We've been co-sponsors of hackathons and of a number of other events that have really brought a whole new group of people into being interested in what's happening with the city. So let's begin actually with payroll. And of course, the most common request that you see come in, and that I'm sure you hear most frequently, is about payroll. And you'll notice here, by the way, that you can check by department, you can check by job class title, there's regular pay, there are earnings over the quarters, there's permanent bonus pay, longevity bonus pay, temporary bonus pay, overtime, lump sum pay. And by the way, something that we added recently, and this was pursuant to a request of Councilmember Parks, which was relating to average city health costs, average city dental costs, and average city basic life, and total average benefit costs for each of these different positions that are in the city. And you can visualize these in a whole bunch of different ways. So let's look, for example, at tree surgeons. You can type that in. And you can see here it gives you information about all the job class titles, everything from Tree Surgeon Supervisor 1 to Tree Surgeon at different departments throughout the city. And you can look and see what these pays are during different periods of time. And you can also use this eventually, and what we hope to be doing is to compare ourselves to other jurisdictions and eventually to use this data to look at what is the productivity of each of the different kind of job classifications in the city. It's the beginning of a process to be able to do that. By the way, if you've got questions at any time, feel free to chime in. Top earners, of course, everybody always wants to know that. We've already created a special view for that, and they're special views you can create and then save. And we have this broken down by base pay, bonus pay, overtime lump sum, other pay adjustments, average benefit costs, etc. And this is a list of the top 100 or over $250,000. Of course, there are no council members on that list, as we know. Fees, fines, and penalties. Let's go to that real quickly. And there are a variety of ways to search for a number of these things. But this, of course, is a very important source of revenues to the city. We've already created this as a preset view. And you'll notice that it is broken down by department. You can break it down by the revenue source. You can also explore what the budget for it was versus what the collected revenue was. And in the case of, for example, animal services, everything from bad check collection fees to breeder license fees. was interesting to me that one of the fees we did well with in the last year compared to what we expected was the bingo percentage fee. Not sure what that means, but and we can take these and look at them as a pie chart as well, which is kind of interesting and informative, things I'm sure that many of you know already, but are also, I think, important for the general public to be really aware of. So here it is as a donut chart, and of course, so much of this is about parking fines, and all these other ones, important as well, but they pale in comparison to parking. Go back for a moment to animal services, and to look at dog licenses for a moment. This is just sort of examples. You can really kind of experiment with this in a whole variety of different ways, and you can see how much of this is about license penalty fees versus dog pound fees versus dog licenses, and then other. You can also click on other to see what the details of that are. Again, it's really a tool to begin to look at everything having to do with the finances in new ways, and to begin to compare ourselves against what our expectations were, and eventually to compare ourselves with other jurisdictions. I'm going to jump ahead to the checkbook for a moment. And this is, as it were, the virtual checkbook of the city, which has been, I think, quite revolutionary in opening up the finances of the city in a way that has never happened before. Other cities had done this already, and Los Angeles was really lagging behind. It was a huge priority for me to do this as quickly as possible. I was told it was going to take a year and a fortune, and thanks to some amazing people at the office, we were able to do it in about 2.5 months for something quite a bit less than a fortune. And it's really interesting to see how it's been received in terms of literally, I think, millions of page views at this point, which tells us that people are very much interested in finding out how the city is spending its money. Let's start actually with the department. You can search by department, so let's go to controller. If I can't look at my own numbers, then how can I ask everybody else to do the same? And you'll see everything from what it is that we spent on shredding, which actually I'm hoping to spend more on shredding in the coming year so that we can get rid of a lot of paper and instead get much more electronic in the way that we do business. There's also AT&T Communications, and you'll see payments that were made here. There used to be cell phones that the controller's office had. We don't have them anymore, but you can actually see a virtual check here. Tells you when that payment was made, what it was for, there's a transaction ID number, etc. My eventual goal, by the way, which I would love to see happen, is that all of the financial documents and the budget and everything else become integrated with one another, so that instead of having PDFs, you have live documents where everything is clickable to something else. But this kind of got me going and wondering, how much did we pay to AT&T? So you can click here and you can see, since the implementation of our financial management system, which was in July of 2011, these are all the various payments that were made to AT&T Communications. And you can see them in a variety of different ways, and to which departments that they were attributable to. That then got me wondering, okay, how much are we paying for not just AT&T, but how much, let's say, in the last year have we paid to the variety of different phone companies? So in this case, we type in AT&T or Verizon or Sprint or Singular or T-Mobile. And there you have it. And you can see we're looking at fiscal year 2013 in this case. And the total came to $10.1 million. And then you can begin to look at everything that made that up. We also looked at, interestingly enough, the gas company bills. So here were Southern California gas company bills. You can see total expenditures. You can see the months in which there were, this is not gas use, but rather it's the amount of payments that were made for it. I kind of got curious about the months in which we seem to have spikes in when we're paying and to what it is attributable to. I have to say, the gas company came into the office, brought a number of representatives, and gave me a fantastic briefing on the city's use of natural gas. and how we use that, for example, to power turbines that also produce air conditioning, among other things, at LAX, etc. And by better understanding even something like our gas use, you can look at what it is that we're paying for all sorts of different utilities and how we might be able to save money in a variety of these different contexts. What you'll no doubt notice is that a lot of this can raise as many questions, if not more, than it actually answers. But that is the beginning of a process of really having this at your fingertips. A lot of this previously, and Councilmember Parks has been around here for a while, knows that a request would have to be asked for a report back, and much of this can be done with a few clicks of the finger now online 24 hours a day. And that's helping not just provide transparency citywide, but to also provide that information and to provide a management tool for everybody who is in City Hall and in city government generally. Any questions about this? So I'll shift real briefly to talk about audits. After all, we are in the Audits Committee. So the vision that I have for audits is to see how we can apply the most recent technologies and best practices and look at what others are doing and leading practices to the kind of recommendations we make. Audits admittedly look somewhat backward by their nature and also have tended to focus on compliance often, as they should. But what we're really looking to do is go beyond that and find ways to actually proactively see change result from these audits. Again, my focus is really looking at return on investment in everything and how we can achieve that. And I'm really going to depend and very much welcome the input of this committee and of the whole council to get your ideas, your thoughts, your analyses, and to really be partnering with you on all of this. We're going to be weaving into these audits a lot more open data, because there's some things that you don't necessarily need a full-out audit for, but the data itself tells you some interesting things, and so does data mining. New formats that we are going to be putting forward, and we've already started with, for the way that we present this information, because the audits can be sometimes very thick and very overwhelming, and we want to bring them to life. We've been using infographics, including the report that we issued last week regarding women at work in the city of Los Angeles. Sort of a picture does sometimes tell 1,000 words. Looking for collaborations, both with other auditing sections of other departments that have them in the city, as well as with others outside of the city. Benchmarking, and that's a little tricky because it's one thing to gather the data, it's another thing to benchmark and to do it accurately, but it's got to happen. And we're looking at how we provide more best practice reports and, in fact, blueprints for change, as opposed to just the recommendations in and of themselves. Our most recent set of audits that came out were actually 3 reports on pensions, 2 of them management, one of them a more technical one for lacers and for LA Fire and Police. They highlighted, among other things, the fact that we had active management in large part and achieved typically lower rates of return than for passive management on many of our retirees' investments. They highlighted a lot of the administrative and operational expenses, which I'm sure you'll be looking into, and how we can achieve perhaps some greater economies of scale with some form of better collaboration between the various pension systems. And in the coming week, we also have a special funds report. I'm actually very excited about this, in which we really went deep into 970 special funds of the city in a way that had not been done before, including 40 columns of data, which allow a great deal of exploration. Now the next step is going to be trying to go much deeper into a number of these, and we've set up a series of criteria, but also welcome your suggestions in terms of what those might be, because needless to say, I'd love to be able to audit every single one of them. there's no way in the world that that can be done. So we have to be judicious in choosing that. Coming up, we have the IEAs, or the Industrial Economic and Administrative Surveys, that have to be done pursuant to the Charter, a minimum of every 5 years. And there's one for DWP, as one is for LAWA that is in the works. And those are done, by the way, collaboratively with the Mayor's Office as well as with the Council, unlike many of the other audits which are done solely by the Controller's Office. We're working on construction and capital improvements, and particularly looking at change orders to the nearly $2.4 billion a year that we spend on construction activities. We've got a workers' comp for police and fire study that we're doing, and looking in a way that hasn't been done before at what is the age distribution, what particular kinds of injuries, and how does this compare to other places. EMS, or emergency billing for our response of our firefighters for ambulance calls. Intergovernmental Revenues is another one, looking at a variety of different sources that we have coming from elsewhere, because they make up a very large portion of our budget. We have previously in this city looked at what it is that we get, not at what it is that we should get, and that's what this focus is going to be. Another one that we're working on, street services. Another on Prop C, and also one that we're beginning to undertake. We're looking at how domestic violence calls and inquiries are handled in the city by LAPD. Internally, we really want to invest some money. We're going to try and find a way to do this on an internal audit, because it's back in the days of Laura Chick, the last time that there was actually an audit of the Controller's Office. And we want to get ourselves audited and find out how it is that we're performing and what our processes are that could be improved. And we are looking at also all of our internal processes which require constant tweaking in terms of the payroll system and the FMS system. We have a number of proposals for reform of the way that travel is reimbursed in the city, which we believe is going to save a lot of time and money for everybody. Streamlining of the P-card program. We're in the process of reforming our waste, fraud, and abuse unit. We'll also be launching a training video, and a lot more on open data, although we obviously are going to need the resources to do so. So last on my list here is sort of, you wanted to know a little bit about budget for the coming year. And our priorities are very much to invest in technology. A lot of that is going to be sort of long-term, and some of those technologies cost a lot of money, but the longer we wait, the worse it gets. Looking at our own internal systems, as I mentioned, and looking at various ways that we can make the experience for our customers a much better one. For example, we are the ones, obviously, who issue checks to vendors, but I want to find a way to make that vendor experience much better. A lot of people who do business with the city complain that it takes a long time to get paid, or they don't know exactly where their payment is. Now, we're dependent on departments to provide us with information so that we can do it in a timely manner, but I believe that there's a lot of reform that can be done to the procurement system as a whole, but also to the vendor experience. And I've been looking at apps that other cities and, in fact, other states have. And the same, by the way, is true in terms of how we do our payroll and the information that we provide to our other customers who are employees of the City of LA. Eventually, I'd like to find ways to bring in our own revenue streams. Perhaps a portion of certain kind of contracts can be dedicated to auditing, because quite frankly, we really don't have enough resources to do that. I want to do more with less, but there's also more that is needed. And we have also outside auditing services, and altogether, we're not actually budgeted for more than about $250,000, but we were able to have savings from prior years so that it would come to about $750,000. But we're looking at what that budget is going to be for the coming year. It's going to stay exactly the same, and we really don't believe that that's adequate, but we're going to try and do the very best that we can with it. So I really look forward to partnering with each and every one of you on this committee and with everybody in the council so that we can achieve the very best results for our constituents, for the people who live in and do business in the city of LA. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to be here, as well as the energy that I'm feeling from this committee and the great interest in the work that we do and in audits and efficiency generally in the city. So with that, I imagine you might have some questions, and I'd be happy to take them.
Mr. Parks, do you have any questions?
I got a couple. One thing I was going to ask you, and this is something I think was started to be worked on several years ago, on those special funds, the 900 or whatever.
970.
Okay, there was a thought that
970?
if these funds rolled over for a 2-year period with minimal to no funds and no activity, that they should be closed down. And that in order to ensure that we're not recreating them later, that they would be, just as you do your audits and you send them to council, they would be sent as a listing and say, here are 14 funds that have had $3 in them and no activity. We're recommending closed down. Once the council approves them, you wipe them off the sheet. And I lose track of whether that ever went into place, but I know that it was discussed several years ago in a way in which there's no way that you can monitor 900, and it's probably a reasonable conclusion that 900 are not being used appropriately or have any use, because some of these funds outlive the person who's sitting in the office.
I think that's a great question. In the process, actually, of compiling this list, we assisted in the closing of quite a number of funds, because we started off with a list that was in excess of 1,000, and then, by the way, there were some new ones that were added as well, and we identified some of the ones that we thought were sort of the best candidates to be closed quickly. There are others that are on that list, and we're working with the departments to figure out how to effectuate that. But among the recommendations in our special funds report are how to really have a more organized and timely way to do exactly what it is that you're suggesting. The other thing that we've done for the first time is, in addition to all those 40 columns of all sorts of data about the monies that are going in and out of these funds, with that kind of data, you're able to identify the ones that have in fact been nascent in one way or another, or where there hasn't been activity, and to be able to flag those. The other is that there was a real problem of knowing exactly what was and was not permitted with a number of these funds. And we had to go back and look at documents that were quite old, some of them on onion paper typed out, of what the original intent of these special funds were. We actually got a lot of it scanned. We also put together, along with the city clerk, a way that each and every single one of these funds is going to be online and on Socrata, and you will be able to click to the governing documents and to the council files that are applicable, so that you actually have that now at your fingertips for the first time and have a better idea of whether that money is being spent pursuant to what it was intended to or not.
Now, what was, you said you're going to be putting together a program in order to start weeding those out. Is that what, due to your annual audits, or how does that work?
Well, that program has already been put in place, because we already closed a number of them out. But I'll turn to Todd Bowie, who's here, who has had a role in that as well. And I don't know if you've had anything that you'd like to add to that. Todd has had a tremendous amount of work that he's put into putting this gargantuan task together.
Todd Bowie, City Controller's Office. And it is correct, every year the Controller's Office, as part of its annual close processes, does reach out to departments on funds that haven't had activity in the last couple of years. And I think this year we've seen a much greater response than we have in years past. I believe it's largely due to the level of effort that we've gone through orchestrating with departments. The knowledge of transparency, I think, has helped in that. It's still an ongoing complicated process to close out funds. You have to figure out where do the monies belong to, get them back to the grantors. They're not always responsive, etc. And so it does require a great deal of work from the departments to close those funds out. But like I said, there have been a significant number of funds identified for closeout, and those processes are ongoing now. And as the controller remarked, those funds that have been identified for closeout will be labeled also on the Socrata site. And on an ongoing basis, we'll continue to push that because it is an unwieldy number of funds to manage.
Very good. The other thing I was going to ask you, when you do audits, and this would be also very helpful, is if part of your audit scheme you would reflect on when the last time this item was audited and what might be holdovers from implementation from the previous audit. And so that it's not like this audit was done not connected with anything else, but that shows that it was done 5 years ago, and there were 7 recommendations, and all 7 were implemented. We get a chance to determine whether any of those recommendations fell by the wayside, did they not get implemented, because I think that's what happens with many of the audits. They're wonderful until people have to implement them. And then the other part of it is if they get old and stale, then it's just a document that's on somebody's bookshelf.
I think that you've made some incredibly salient points on this as well, and let me address that in a few ways. First of all, audits by their very nature can get very thick, and what we're looking to do beside the way that it has been presented is also find some real basic ways that they can be digestible with very kind of clear indication of what should be done. Second of all, we've loaded these onto our Socrata base over here. And by the way, when I refer to Socrata, it's a company actually that helps to create these open data websites, and they're the partner that we have in the creation of the control panel. But putting the data, putting the audits, putting the recommendations up in that kind of format also creates for a better way to track and to go back and look at a number of these things. We've also been designing a template for all of the audit reports. There's a template, obviously, that we have to follow in order to really comply with all of the accounting standards, but there's also room for us to do it in such a way that it will be as more easily readable as possible. And a necessary component of each one is what previous audits have been done and what has or has not been accomplished, and that's part of the template. Absolutely.
Very good. And then one thing you mentioned on liability, and this is something that I guess it spikes and goes down, but there's about 4 of them that seem never to go away in dealing with either traffic collisions, the trips and falls, the use of force, and then we have a growing number of employee-on-employee lawsuits where employee relations. And I don't know quite whether we can categorize those by department so that general managers are aware or the mayor's aware as they rate general managers. But those are 4 that just don't go away, and it costs us literally millions and millions of dollars.
As a matter of fact, we've created a number of views that are directly related to what it is that you're mentioning. You can see here, this is a view that was created for liability claims. This is for fiscal year 2013. The totals we have here are about $85.9 million. The number of transactions, 3,220. Staggering, scary, depressing, but it's important to look at it in this fashion. What we have right now are a couple of different columns, and we're discussing with the City Attorney's Office how we can make this more robust, so that what we want to include is the parties. Vendor name here can actually be the person that it was paid to, or it may be the law firm, for example, that it was paid to. So we want to break that out into two different columns. Also, to describe what the nature of the claim is, whether it was paid pursuant to a settlement or pursuant to a court judgment. So many of these are also categorized as non-departmental liability claims because of the way the information is entered into the system. And again, we're working with the city attorney's office to change that so that you can actually see to which departments they're truly attributable. And then you'll be able to search by law firm, you'll be able to search by type of claim, you'll be able to search by department, etc. One of the things I know that the city attorney's office is asking for in the upcoming budget is better software to track this, and that is going to help us tremendously as well.
So when you click on the claim, on the person's name, it just tells you how much was paid and when, and the transaction number?
You can see the transaction amount, yes.
But it doesn't give you a description
It does not at this moment give you a description. There are ways to extract that data, but it hasn't been entered in a way that lends itself to easily doing that. We are trying to essentially recreate that, and we're working and really appreciate the cooperation the city attorney's office has given us in achieving exactly the kind of list that we absolutely must have.
Now, you're going to run into any issues as far as confidentiality?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have, and Todd Bowie can speak to this as well, we have really been very careful in terms of how we've been rolling this data out from a point of view of confidentiality. The last thing we want to do is invite a lawsuit for what it is that we put out there. Todd, you want to maybe say a word about that?
Yes, we have vetted with departments and with city attorney much of the information that's available now on the site. Particularly for liability claims, those are generally being approved in a public forum, and so the amount and to who it's being distributed is not confidential unto itself. There could be other elements of information which could make what the information confidential, such as, for particular individuals, maybe their address or if it's a medical related claim, for instance. So when we get to higher and higher levels of detail, we have to be more and more careful about how we're presenting the information.
Yeah. What I was thinking on liability is the issue of if it identifies the person involved or the attorney is one thing, but if you identify the city employee, that then takes down a path of people looking at whether the next step is whether there was discipline and all those other things that just, right. And that's the issue, whether employee identification, other than saying just the city was sued, is it Parks that the city council was sued, and what the amount came out of?
Yes, that's definitely a valid concern, and as we're working with city attorney on the additional information that we're looking to compile here, that'll definitely be one of the points of information that we'll have to reconcile in this.
And then the last question I have is that before I left budget, we were working on a project that for years, I think we probably not used our public access money that comes to us from cable TV. And of the two departments that are almost exclusively public access departments, it's the controller and the city clerk. But yet, what we find is that 1% money goes to to the ITA, and it's for infrastructure. You can't basically alter that. But there's I think a pot of 5% money, in which comes in, but the general fund eats about 60% of it. And yet, the primary departments that deal with public access do not get access to those funds. It is specifically designated for public access, and the city generally declares its surplus and moves it over to the general fund. Only 40% of it goes to ITA. So that's something that has always been, I always viewed as a viable source to be able, because once you start all of this material, you can't afford to let it die or get stagnant, because it's only going to be as good as the last person who said it was accurate. And so it's one of those places that you can't afford every year to say, well, if the budget had done well, we'd have fixed that, or we could have added that, or we'd have updated it. It's a part of a system that has to be real-time, live, and funded. And the only way you're going to do that is have designated funds that are special funds or something outside of the general fund of the budget. But that's been a source that, in my judgment, over time has been somewhat misused, particularly when the amount of it that goes, it's not 60% for public access, it's 40%, and then 60% goes into the general fund, and it just kind of dissipates. So I'll just throw that out.
I'm smiling as you're saying all of this because I'm thinking you must have a spy in my office who's reporting on the discussions we've been having. Because we've actually had a discussion about exactly this subject last week because we are putting the final touches on an audit of the telecommunications fund, which addresses precisely what it is that you just talked about,
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
with recommendations that hopefully you will like.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure. First off, before I even ask you questions, I just wanted to say I think you're doing a great job as controller, and I really appreciate the focus and energy that you're bringing to this job, and the priorities that you expressed in terms of, investing in technology, doing the capacity building so that we really can have a long-term approach, because we need to have that kind of long view to make this city the city that it needs to be.
Thank you so much.
A couple little questions, though. You mentioned the intergovernmental, you're going to look at not just what we get, but what we ought to get. And I kind of scratched my head how you actually go about doing that. Are you going to do a comparison with other cities? And that is a tricky one. And what's the basis for that?
It is a tricky one, and we haven't gotten it all figured out yet. Part of beginning this audit that we have is to figure out what the various measurements would be, and they're going to depend on what sources that we're actually talking about. Some of it is money, for example, that is collected by the county for property tax. Some of it is for documentary transfer tax. Some of it is for personal business property tax. There are a whole series of different
Sort of the
sources.
formulaic funding that we're getting is really, that makes more sense to me.
It's largely formulaic, yes, but the question is whether the formula is being followed or not.
Sure.
And then the other question is, in some cases, how good is the collection? And then are we suffering if collection is something less than what it ought to be? One of those examples would be particularly as it relates to one of my personal obsessions, which is documentary transfer tax.
Makes sense. I could also see you guys being very involved in the performance-based budgeting concepts that the mayor has talked about. I didn't hear you mention that. I wondered if that is something that you're going to get engaged in, thinking of, or perhaps you don't see the role, or how you plan on engaging in.
Well, as the ones who are really the keepers of the financial data of the city, I think that there's a crucial role that we are going to be and that we are playing when it comes to looking at performance-based budgeting. And I think we're in a very interesting time in our city because I'm sort of the newbie to City Hall, but I'm pleased to say that the relations are very good and that we're doing a lot of collaboration and cooperation between our office, the council president, the city attorney's office, and the mayor. And I think that's quite frankly what the people want from us is to really work together in as many ways as we can. We have a very important role in being very independent, obviously, but there's also a great deal of benefit that can happen from working collaboratively and cooperatively. But we've been very much a part of those meetings, those discussions, and looking at what are the measurements of success. Quite frankly, we're exploring those for our own office as well. What is a really true and accurate and meaningful measurement of success? Moreover, the measurements that you put in place are to some extent going to really influence the results that you get. I remember a couple of years ago having a meeting with one of the social service agencies in the county, and they had set a measurement for success of how many referrals they do of the people who come in the door. And it was extremely well-intentioned because it was about trying to hook people up with as many services as they might possibly qualify for. Sounds great. But what it did was perversely provide an incentive to basically send everybody who came in the door somewhere else because they got an extra point for sending them somewhere else. And we better be very, very careful what we choose as our measurements of success. Tricky.
Well, it's an area I think you could have a lot of value added to, so I hope you you get engaged and that we, as a council, make sure that we engage you in that, because I think that's a critical partnership that can benefit the city. I just wanted to ask about the Quality and Productivity Commission, something you served on and then did very well with, and now as the controller, sort of the, I don't know what the term is here, you get to oversee that, or not oversee, but get to work with them closely. How is that working, and how do you see that relationship changing, and is there something that can be done to better capitalize on that energy that's there?
Well, I actually had the honor of serving both on the county's Quality and Productivity Commission and the city's, and that gave me an interesting perspective on each one of them. The cities took a lot of cutbacks over quite a number of years to the point where it pretty much had zero staff, and that has been very, very problematic. It's the CAO who actually is to provide services to the Quality and Productivity Commission. I think there have been some discussions going on about what the best way it is to provide them with some. Moreover, there are a number of new appointments that have been made by the mayor and some great folks who I think are bringing some energy to it. One of the important things they do is look at things that actually go right, because we talk about a lot of things that go wrong, but there are also things that go right, and then how do you take that and apply those lessons learned? How do you also, just even in the process of having an application for awards of good projects happening in the city, how do you use that as a way to get departments and get teams in the city to think in terms of ROI and to look at how much money are we spending on X or Y or Z and what is the actual return we're getting? That in of itself is a very important thing, not even just saying thank you for that which went well. There are a number of programs that the counties has. They've also got a couple of full-time staff people associated with it. But there is, I think, a vital role that commission can play, and it's in the process, I think, of rebuilding capacity. And I heartily hope that they will be provided with more resources that they really need and deserve to do what they need to do.
Thank you.
And we're working with them in a variety of different ways, and talking to them about how we can best use the resources within our office to kind of team up.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, the open data stuff, we've talked a lot about that, is a huge winner, and just keep at it, because it not only provides the transparency and accessibility, but it allows us to leverage the sort of unlimited energy of the public out there that can capitalize on the information that we're putting in and help us become more efficient by opening up opening up our books to the public that might have an interest, and to folks who want to develop apps. So thank you for you.
No, thank you so much.
And thank you very much. You did an excellent job of getting to all my questions during your presentation.
All of them?
So, I had budget questions, and I had a bunch of other, but you touched on pretty much all of them, so thank you so much. This was my first opportunity to really take a look at your open data, which I've been reading about, but this is the first time I actually got to see how interactive it is and the different things that you can be doing with it in addition to what you see. There are definitely links to add additional information as people are trying to maneuver their way around it. So I think it's a great tool and definitely a good way to show the public that we're trying to be transparent and what we're spending their money in. So I applaud you for that. And we've talked about this off the record in terms of what we can be doing as a committee to help help with what you want to do and accomplish, and what we're looking at as a committee to try to audit as well. So I look forward to working with you on collaborating, not for the sake of auditing, but making sure that we are doing an efficient job in doing so, and making sure that we implement some of our audits, which I've expressed my frustration in terms of our implementation isn't always there, and what's what we need to be moving towards to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So thank you so much for being here. I hope this isn't the last time we get to see you as we're moving forward and as we're gearing up in terms of what we're going to be doing in this committee. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and for your leadership in moving all of this forward. And as I mentioned, we are very happy to come out to each and every one of the districts to do a presentation for the public, as well as for council staff, which we've done some of, and provide that opportunity for your staffs to be able to really navigate and maneuver within the control panel as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We kept it under an hour.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Todd, by the way.
Thank you.